Jungkook's sister breaks her silence after Taehyung's sudden marriage. Her shocking post stuns ARMY and ignites a storm of theories online. The phone dropped from Jungkook's hand the second he saw her post. The screen dimmed, but the image so stark, so deliberate was seared into his memory. A black and white photo of a cracked wedding ring, with a caption that read, "Not every union is worth celebrating." The air in the living room was heavy, despite the humming AC. Jungkook sat frozen, eyes darting from the blank screen to the silence of the apartment. The echo of that single post, uploaded minutes after the announcement of Taehyung's private marriage ceremony, was already spiraling into viral chaos. His sister, Jeonyeon, wasn't the kind to post cryptic things. In fact, she was rarely online at all. But this was not just a post. This was a message, and the timing was no coincidence. The news of Taehyung's marriage had shattered the fandom like glass. No warning, no leaks, no ceremony photos, just a blunt statement from the agency, a vague congratulatory post, and silence from the members. But Jungkook hadn't spoken either, and neither had Jimin. But Jeonjin? She had. The moment her story went live, Jungkook's sister trended worldwide. Comments exploded. Is she shading Taehyung? Was this Jungkook's way of reacting without reacting? Did Taehyung betray someone? Jungkook leaned forward, rubbing his temple, heart drumming a pattern too fast, too erratic. His phone lit up again this time, a group chat message from Yoongi. "You okay?" He didn't reply. He couldn't. Jeonyeon had always been protective, fiercely so. When they were kids, she'd throw herself in front of him when their father got too loud, too angry. When he debuted, she shielded their parents from online hate. And when Taehyung and Jungkook had their falling out years ago, the kind no one outside the group ever truly understood, Jeonyeon had pulled away from the boys completely, including Taehyung. But to post that? Now, the walls of his apartment felt smaller, claustrophobic. The tension thickened as another ping rang out, this time from Jimin. One word. "Yeah?" Jungkook shut his eyes. Jimin knew. Of course he did. Jungkook got up and walked to the window, city lights blurring against his unfocused gaze. A part of him wanted to call her, ask her what the hell she thought she was doing. But he already knew. This wasn't just anger. This was defense. This was pain. She'd seen the same headline he had Taehyung's secretly married non-celebrity girlfriend in intimate private ceremony, and she'd known how deep that wound still ran. He remembered the night Taehyung first mentioned her, a girl he'd met during a fashion week after-party in Paris. "She's different," he'd said. "She doesn't care who I am." Jungkook had smiled, lied through his teeth, supported him, cheered him on, even though every time Taehyung looked at her, something in Jungkook folded inward. The phone buzzed again. This time it was his mother, Jeongyun. "What is she doing?" she wrote. No emojis, no warmth. Jungkook typed slowly, fingers shaking. "She's protecting me." He hit send before he could delete it. The next morning, Jeongyun's post was gone but not forgotten. Screenshots flooded Twitter, dissected by fans with surgeon-like precision. Some sided with her, others demanded she apologize. Her silence only made it worse. Meanwhile, Taehyung's bride was still a ghost. No photos, no name, not even a silhouette, just rumors, and a growing wave of speculation that she wasn't just a stranger, she was a trigger. Jungkook walked into the practice room later that day, mask on, hood up. Namjoon was already there, headphones in, scrolling. "You need to talk to her," Namjoon said without looking up. "I didn't tell her to post it, but you didn't stop her either." "She doesn't listen to me anymore." Namjoon finally looked up. His gaze was steady, quiet, too knowing. "She's not the one who needs to explain." Jungkook didn't answer. The truth was, he hadn't spoken to Taehyung in weeks. Not since the fight. Not since the last rehearsal where they'd stood on opposite ends of the stage, saying everything through silence. It had been building. Months of tension. Misunderstandings. One too many missed replies. Taehyung's avoidance. Jungkook's jealousy. The girl. The distance. But marriage? That was the nail in the coffin. At least, it felt like one. Later that night, Jungkook sat on his balcony, phone in hand, reading a DM from a faceless ARMY. "Your sister is a queen for saying what you couldn't." He didn't know whether to be grateful or horrified. He looked up at the stars. Somewhere, maybe Taehyung was doing the same. Or maybe he was with her. His fingers hovered over his notes app. He'd been writing a song, a quiet one, full of unresolved chords. Now, lyrics tumbled in. You picked a world where I don't belong. I stayed quiet for too long. But silence doesn't mean I'm okay. It just means I've learned how to stay. He saved it. Then, without thinking, he posted a single photo to his story. A stage, empty, microphone on the floor, no caption. Within minutes, ARMY was in full meltdown again. Theories churned, speculation soared. But Jungkook said nothing. Not yet. Let them wonder. Let them piece together the puzzle of broken friendships, quiet betrayals, and unsaid truths. Because sometimes, the loudest reaction is the one you never give. And Jeonyeon? She had simply lit the match. The fire was already burning. The rehearsal room felt like a mausoleum of sound once filled with the rhythm of trust, now echoing with ghostly silences. Jungkook sat alone on the edge of the wooden platform, legs dangling off the side, his phone face down beside him. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, flickering with the kind of instability that mimicked his chest. He stared at the floor, his hands clasped together between his knees, the lyrics he'd scribbled earlier playing on loop in his head. The door creaked open. His heart didn't flinch. It was Jimin. He didn't speak immediately, just leaned against the mirrored wall, watching Jungkook with that unreadable expression that only he could wear without effort. Something between worry and exhaustion, like he'd spent the whole day picking up emotional debris with bare hands. She deleted it, Jimin finally said, eyes flicking toward the phone Jungkook hadn't touched in over an hour. I know, Jungkook muttered, voice hoarse from disuse. Doesn't matter though, it's everywhere now. News outlets are twisting it into statements, and fans are drawing battle lines. Some think you're sending messages through her. Others think it's war. Jungkook's jaw clenched. War, he echoed. Over a ring and a caption. Jimin stepped forward, crossing the room slowly, as though careful not to disturb the fragile air between them. It's not just about the caption, he said gently. It's about timing, about everything that's been brewing. People feel like they've been lied to. He stopped in front of Jungkook, looking down at him. The overhead light cast Jimin's face in partial shadow, like even the truth didn't want to land all at once. But you didn't lie. You just didn't talk, Jimin added. Jungkook tilted his head back, staring up at him. What was I supposed to say, Jimin? That my best friend got married and didn't tell me? That he stopped answering my calls for months, then dropped this news like a bomb and expects nothing to explode? Jimin crouched in front of him now, face softening. You don't owe the world anything, but you owe yourself honesty. Jungkook looked away, throat tightening. I didn't think it would hurt this much. There it was. The truth that had been fermenting inside him like a slow poison. I knew we weren't close like before. I knew things had shifted, but to find out through a press release, and the fact that Jonghyun reacted first, it makes me look like a coward, like I needed her to speak for me. She wasn't speaking for you, Jimin said quietly. She was speaking for herself. Maybe even for all the versions of you that still can't say it aloud. Jungkook blinked rapidly. His voice dipped lower. Say what? Jimin's voice broke the silence with all the weight of someone who's known him too long to pretend anymore. That you loved him. The room stilled. The words hovered in the air. Not violent, not cruel, but raw. Undeniable. Jungkook didn't deny them. I did, he whispered. The silence after that confession wasn't empty. It was full of every memory that made it true. Taehyung's laughter at 3 a.m. in hotel rooms when the rest of the world was sleeping. The quiet shoulder touches during rehearsals when words weren't enough. The way Taehyung looked at him like he saw the storm and didn't flinch. Like he welcomed it. And then, the slow unraveling. The missed messages. The silences. The unexplained distance. Then the announcement. Marriage. Jimin exhaled, slowly sitting beside him. You know what makes this all harder? We don't even hate him. We want to. God, I've tried. But I just can't. Jungkook nodded. Me neither. They sat there, letting the honesty settle between them, an invisible balm for invisible wounds. Later that night, Jonghyun showed up at his apartment without calling. Her eyes were lined with defiance, but her lips were pressed into a tight line. She handed him a small container kimchi she had made earlier that day and sat on the couch as if she lived there. "You're mad," she said before he could speak. "I'm not," Jungkook replied. You didn't want me involved." Jungkook sat down beside her. "Not like that." Jeongyeon's shoulders dropped. "He hurt you." He closed his eyes. "It's not about sides. It's not about attacking him. It's just complicated." She looked at him. That same protective sister's gaze she had when they were kids and he came home crying after school. The world thinks everything has to be clean. Love or hate. Right or wrong. But what you had with him was never clean. Jungkook's chest tightened. "No, it wasn't." Jeongyeon placed her hand over his. "Then don't expect your healing to be clean either." They sat in silence, the city lights flickering through the windows like distant stars. But the world didn't wait for him to heal. Within a week, Taehyung posted a single photo. A shot of him holding hands with someone, her face out of frame, captioned, "Found peace." The comment section exploded. Some armies congratulated him. Others demanded he address the pain he left behind. But most were drawn to what wasn't in the photo, Jungkook. And Jungkook saw it too. The hand wasn't just a hand. It was the erasure of history. The final punctuation on a sentence he hadn't realized was ending. That night, he went live. Not to speak, just to play music. He sat at the piano, lit only by warm studio lights, and sang fragments of a song no one had heard before. The lyrics were delicate, haunting, a slow bleed of emotion that didn't need names to cut deep. Lines like, "You gave me silence, dressed it in peace. I called it love, mistook it for release." The comments streamed so fast he couldn't read them. But he didn't stop playing. In the middle of the second verse, he hesitated, fingers hovering over the keys. And then he whispered, "Some endings don't need closure, just space." Then he ended the live. The world caught its breath. Articles came out the next day. Jungkook speaks through song, a response to Taehyung. Jeongyeon's caption finally makes sense. BTS riff deeper than we thought. But none of them really knew. Only those closest understood that this wasn't a war. It was a heartbreak with too many witnesses. Taehyung never publicly replied. But a few days later, he was seen at the airport alone. Face guarded, eyes distant. The media didn't catch it, but a fan video did. A faint whisper, just before he disappeared past security. "Tell him, I didn't know how to say goodbye." Maybe that was the closest thing to an apology Jungkook would ever get, and maybe that was enough. Or maybe it would never be. But life moved forward, slowly, inch by inch. Healing not in grand reconciliations, but in the quiet acceptance that some chapters close without neat endings. And Jeongyeon? She never posted about it again. She didn't have to. Her message had already been heard. And somewhere, in all the noise, Jungkook had finally found his voice. The knock on the studio door startled Jungkook. He had been sitting alone in the dark, staring at the soft blue light of the recording console, headphones around his neck, a half-finished melody looping in his ears. The knock came again softer this time, almost hesitant. He didn't respond. Didn't need to. The door opened anyway. It was Hoseok. No smile this time, just quiet concern etched into every corner of his face. "You're still here," he said gently, stepping inside. Jungkook gave a small nod, his voice a whisper. Couldn't sleep. Hoseok sat on the couch behind him. The silence stretched, comfortable in its heaviness. He didn't speak for a long time, just watched Jungkook's back, the way his shoulders curved as though carrying something he couldn't put down. "You haven't called him," Hoseok said finally. Jungkook's hands tightened in his lap. "What would I say?" The air pulsed with the weight of everything unspoken between them. "He's hurting too," Hoseok added. Jungkook turned then, slowly, eyes shadowed. "Then why did he do it?" The question wasn't rhetorical. It held a raw, aching curiosity, like he still hoped someone could give him an answer that would make it make sense, that would make the pain dissolve. Hoseok didn't try. He just met Jungkook's gaze. Sometimes people run toward peace because they can't find it in the chaos they've left behind. Jungkook blinked, jaw tightening. "Am I the chaos? I think you both were." The silence after that was heavier. Jungkook looked back at the screen, at the waveform frozen mid-beat. He should have told me. Hoseic leaned forward, elbows on knees. You both stopped telling each other things a long time ago. Jungkook closed his eyes. The truth stung more than any lie ever could. After Hoseic left, Jungkook stayed in the studio until dawn. He didn't touch the piano, didn't sing. He just sat, letting the memory of old laughter echo in the corners of the room. That's what hurt the most, how vivid those memories were. How they refused to fade even when the person they belonged to had already moved on. The next day, he woke to chaos. Not in the world outside, but in his phone. His sister's name was trending again, but not just because of her post. Someone had leaked an old photo. It was a candid, taken backstage years ago. Taehyung was in the middle, smiling. One hand casually looped around Jungkook's shoulder, the other resting on Jonghyun's head like a brother. The caption, "And he called her family once. Jungkook rosé." The photo spread like wildfire. Old fans began pulling up tweets, quotes, clips, any moment that hinted at how close Taehyung once was to his family. The public love, the dinners, the offhanded mentions during lives, everything resurfaced. And with it, the betrayal deepened. Because Taehyung hadn't just walked away from Jungkook. He'd walked away from everyone who loved him too. That afternoon, Jonghyun came back. No warning. She didn't knock this time, just entered, like she always used to when they were younger. Her face was pale, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. She didn't speak right away, just sat beside him on the floor of his living room, knees pulled to her chest. "Do you hate him now?" she asked softly. Jungkook stared at the ceiling. "No. Do you still love him?" He didn't answer. Jonghyun leaned her head on his shoulder, whispering, "It's okay if you do." He let the silence stretch. Finally, he whispered, "It's different now. I don't even know what I feel." They stayed that way until the sun went down. But peace was never meant to last in times like this. That night, another post exploded online. Not from Taehyung, not from the members, but from the bride. She had stayed silent all this time. Hidden, protected, a name without a face. But now, she posted a single quote on her private account, which was quickly screenshotted and spread by someone who followed her. Healing isn't selfish. Distance isn't betrayal. Silence isn't guilt. That was all. But it was enough. Fans immediately interpreted it as a shot toward Jungkook and Jonghyun. Accusations flew. Rumors twisted tighter. Some believed the bride was trying to justify Taehyung's actions. Others thought she was firing back at the sister's now infamous deleted post. Jungkook saw it. He read it once. Then again. And a third time. And then he laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. He turned off his phone and threw it across the room. It didn't break, but something inside him did. In the following days, the tension within the group began bleeding into their work. During a scheduled group shoot, Jungkook showed up late. Taehyung didn't show at all. Jin, freshly back from service, tried to bridge the gap-light jokes. Awkward laughter, but the air remained tight, flammable. Yoongi kept glancing toward the empty chair meant for Taehyung, lips pressed into a thin line. Jimin hovered close to Jungkook, eyes scanning him every few seconds like he was about to collapse. Afterward, in the hallway, Namjoon caught Jungkook by the wrist. "Do you want to fix this?" he asked. Jungkook met his eyes, searching. "I don't know how. Start by not being silent." That night, Jungkook wrote a letter. He didn't send it, but he wrote it. It read, "Hyung, I don't know if you'll ever read this, or if you care anymore. Maybe this is more for me than you, but I need to say it. You should have told me. You should have given me the dignity of hearing it from your mouth, not a headline. We've been through too much for it to end in silence. But I'm not angry. I'm just tired. Tired of pretending it didn't hurt. Tired of hearing your name in every quiet room. Tired of wondering what I did to deserve being left behind. Maybe you didn't mean to hurt me. Maybe you were scared. But I was scared too. I still am. I miss you. I wish that didn't still matter. Yag." He folded it, placed it inside a notebook, and locked it in the drawer. The next day, he sang. A new song. One without a title. A soft piano. A delicate harmony. The kind of song that didn't scream pain but whispered it. His fans didn't need a track list to know what it meant. They felt it. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the internet, someone posted a message. A faceless account. No photo, no name. But the words said, "He still hears you." Jungkook never replied, but he saw it. And that night, for the first time in weeks, he slept without dreams. Under the weight of a world still spinning with whispers and assumptions, Jungkook moved like a man caught between past and present, always a few seconds behind the reality that kept shifting around him. Days bled into nights in the studio, and the hum of the monitors became his only constant. The only place he could breathe was inside a booth, where no questions could find him, where the soundproof glass silenced every headline, every fan theory, every betrayal that refused to fade. He didn't speak to anyone for 3 days. The members gave him space, knowing well the difference between solitude and isolation. But Jeongyeon came by on the 4th morning. She didn't knock. She never did anymore. He found her in his kitchen, wearing one of his hoodies, pouring tea like it was her house. "You haven't eaten," she said without looking up. He wanted to say he had. He wanted to lie for her comfort. But what was the point? "I'm fine," he said. "No," she replied. "You're quieter." He leaned against the wall, watching her move around the kitchen with familiarity that stung. It reminded him of the times Taehyung used to crash here too, back when they were inseparable. When nights ended with laughter spilling into the hallway and Taehyung curling up on the couch, mumbling about how the city lights made him dream in color. Now those nights were ghosts. She set down a bowl in front of him, kimchi jjigae. Still steaming, still smelling like home. But he didn't move. Jeongyeon sat across from him, finally meeting his eyes. "You keep letting the world talk for you." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "You let my post be your voice. You let the fans interpret your silence. You let his wife's words become your guilt." Her words were sharp, but not cruel. "You want closure?" she asked. "Then stop hiding in lyrics and piano chords. Say what you need to say." He stared at the soup, throat tight. "And if what I want to say just hurts more people, then say it carefully. But still say it." The moment lingered, heavy with something unspoken. Later that day, he walked through the halls of Hybe with headphones on and a black cap pulled low. People nodded as he passed. Staff whispered after him. No one stopped him. They knew better. He found Jimin in one of the dance studios, alone, stretching with quiet intensity. The mirrors reflected them, both the bruised silence of two people who'd seen too much and said too little. Jimin didn't look up. "You're here." Jungkook stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You always knew, didn't you, about what I felt?" Jimin's eyes flicked toward him in the mirror. "You think you were hiding it?" Jungkook's laugh was soft, bitter. "He never looked at me that way." "No," Jimin said carefully. "But he never looked at anyone else the way he looked at you either." That stopped him. He loved you, Jungkook, just not the way you needed. "And what does that mean now?" "It means you survived. Barely. But you did." The next day, Taehyung posted again. This time it wasn't cryptic. No shadows, no metaphors. It was a photo of the beach. A grainy Polaroid-style shot of two shadows walking across sand, one shorter, one taller. You couldn't see their faces, but anyone who had followed them for years knew exactly who it was. Jungkook's phone blew up instantly. The caption was a single line. "I miss the version of us who thought we had time." No tags, no names. But it didn't matter. The world already knew. Jungkook didn't react publicly. Not right away. But the photo haunted him. Not because of the words, but because of the memory it was pulled from. That day on Jeju Island, years ago, when everything still felt infinite. Before heartbreaks. Before distance. Before misunderstandings stacked so high neither of them knew how to climb over them anymore. That night, he went live again. No announcement, no filter, just him, a guitar, and a chair. The screen filled with hearts and comments within seconds. But he didn't read them. He strummed once. Then again, fingers unsure, heart not. "I don't have answers," he began, voice low, rough with emotion. "And maybe I never will. But I'm tired of letting everyone else tell our story." He paused, looked straight into the camera. "So here's mine." Then he sang. It wasn't polished, not even finished. But the words were raw, broken at the edges, stitched together with years of pain and love and everything in between. "You chose silence, and I made a home in the noise. You wore peace like armor, while I drowned in your voice. Still I waited, like the ocean waits for rain, hoping you'd come back. To a shoreline that still knew your name. By the time he finished, the comments were sobbing with him. The next morning, the media called it a confession. Fans called it closure. But Jungkook knew better. It was neither. It was just the beginning. The following week, he received a letter. No return name, but the handwriting was familiar. He sat with it for hours before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "I didn't run from you. I ran from what I couldn't give you. You deserved someone who could stay. But I was always leaving. Even when I was beside you. I'm sorry I made you love a version of me that never knew how to love you back. Tunnamasbosk." He folded the letter slowly. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just placed it beside the letter he had written weeks before. Two unsent truths, now side by side.
The world outside continued spinning. But something inside him stilled. Not healed. Not yet. But ready to begin. Not with Taehyung. Not with Jeongyun. Not with the fans. But with himself. Under the pale light of the dawn filtering through his apartment blinds, Jungkook stood barefoot by the window, his silhouette etched against the city skyline that shimmered faintly beneath the early fog. The letter from Taehyung sat on the table behind him, unread for the fourth time that morning but felt in every breath. It didn't shout at him. It whispered, over and over again. He had memorized the lines without meaning to, but the truth inside them still didn't sit right. They floated between apology and escape, between love and abandonment. Jeongyun hadn't said a word since he showed it to her. She'd read it silently, her expression unreadable, before gently setting it down on the table and walking to the kitchen like it hadn't just cracked open another piece of his chest. But she didn't need to say anything. Her silence was no longer absence, it was presence in its fiercest form. She stayed in the apartment that night. He hadn't asked her to, she just did. The next few days passed like fragments. Time stretched and shrank in strange ways. Some hours felt like seconds. Some minutes lasted entire years. He continued working in the studio, sometimes recording until his voice gave out, sometimes just sitting in the dark with a guitar on his lap and no idea how to begin. Jimin visited once, bringing takeout and soft jokes that didn't land, but that wasn't the point. Jin texted him random memes at 3 a.m. and Jungkook laughed more than he expected to. Yoongi sent a voice note that simply said, "Live through this, not for them, for you." Namjoon sent a book, no note, just a highlighter left inside marking a single line. "Forgiveness is not about them, it's about setting yourself free." But no one mentioned the beach photo again. No one brought up the marriage. And no one dared ask if he would ever reply. It was the silence between him and Taehyung that became louder than any rumor. Yet that silence finally shattered on a cold Thursday afternoon. Jungkook was stepping out of his building when he saw the black SUV parked just across the street. He recognized the shape of the man leaning against the vehicle before he even fully registered the face. Time slowed. His breath hitched. For a moment, his feet refused to move. Taehyung stood with his hands in his pockets, hair slightly disheveled, sunglasses hiding his eyes. But he didn't wear a mask. He didn't try to disappear. He looked like someone who had accepted that confrontation was long overdue. Jungkook walked forward slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. When he stopped just in front of him, neither of them spoke. Not right away. The wind stirred between them, carrying with it every unsaid word, every late-night echo, every version of themselves they'd lost along the way. Taehyung was the first to break. "I didn't think you'd come down." "I didn't think you'd show up," Jungkook replied. Taehyung gave a humorless chuckle. "Fair." Silence again. Then Jungkook asked the question that had haunted him the most. "Why didn't you tell me?" Taehyung removed his sunglasses slowly, revealing tired eyes rimmed with something deeper than just exhaustion. "Because I knew I couldn't explain it in a way that wouldn't destroy what little was left between us." "You destroyed it anyway." "I know." Jungkook felt the sting behind his eyes but refused to let it fall. "You married her." I did. Do you love her? Taehyung didn't answer right away. When he did, it wasn't with a yes. She made it easy to breathe. The words hit harder than Jungkook expected, because in those 7 syllables was a truth he couldn't ignore. With him, Taehyung had never breathed easily. Their bond was too intense, too unfiltered, a wildfire, not a calm sea. Jungkook looked away, his throat tightening. Was I that hard to love? Taehyung stepped closer, his voice softer now. You were impossible not to love. It broke something inside Jungkook. But it also stitched something too. You should have said that before, Jungkook whispered. I didn't know how. Jungkook finally looked at him, really looked. And in Taehyung's face, he didn't see the man who had left him behind. He saw the boy he had once sung with at midnight, the friend who braided a flower into his hair during tour, the man who used to sit beside him in silence and make him feel understood without saying a word. They were both older now, but maybe not wiser. Jungkook stepped back. I don't hate you, he said quietly. Taehyung's shoulders eased with the faintest of exhales. But I'm not ready to forgive you either. I know. Jungkook swallowed, his voice barely holding. I loved you, Taehyung, and I'll probably always carry some of that with me, but I need to learn how to carry it without letting it hurt me. Taehyung's eyes shone. I want that for you too. They stood in the cold for another moment, neither reaching for the other. There would be no hug, no tears, no cinematic reconciliation. But there was truth. And that was enough. When Taehyung finally got back into his car, Jungkook watched him drive away until the black vehicle disappeared into the traffic. He didn't feel lighter, but he didn't feel crushed either. Later that evening, he opened his notebook and flipped to the page where his unsent letter sat. This time, he didn't reread it. He simply closed the cover and tucked it into his drawer. He wasn't going to send it. And he wasn't going to burn it either. It was part of him now. Part of the story he survived. Instead, he turned to a fresh page. And he began writing something new. Not about Taehyung. Not about betrayal. But about standing in the ruins and finding beauty in what still remained. He called the new song Ashes. And when he recorded it a week later, he smiled for the first time in months. Because this time, the song wasn't a cry for someone to return. It was a hymn for letting go. The morning after recording Ashes, Jungkook sat in the empty hallway outside HYBE's smaller Studio B, knees tucked up to his chest, his phone resting screen down beside him. The hallway was quiet at this hour, a corridor of flickering lights and old posters, some curling at the edges. His eyes stayed fixed on the far wall, unmoving. He finished the song. He poured the last of that haunting ache into it, but peace still hadn't come. Closure wasn't a switch you flipped once and got relief. It came in waves, some violent, some numb. A cleaning staff member passed him with a polite nod. He smiled faintly, a mechanical gesture. His mind was somewhere else. Behind the studio door, the speakers were still playing the final mix, soft and aching. He could hear the faint hum of his own voice bleeding through the wall, and it startled him how raw he still sounded, like his lungs had been cut open mid-melody. He hadn't spoken to Jeongyeon that day, not because he was avoiding her. He just didn't know how to explain the strange quiet inside him. She understood everything so far, but even she couldn't stand in for what this grief felt like. It wasn't heartbreak in the traditional sense. He wasn't mourning a romance that never happened. He was mourning the kind of bond most people only find once in a lifetime, and even then, rarely. He remembered something Taehyung once said long ago, one night after a concert when the adrenaline still crackled in their bones. If I ever lose you, I don't think I'll realize until it's too late. Jungkook had laughed, had swatted at him like it was a joke. Maybe it had been then. But now those words clung to him with unbearable weight. He was about to head home when his phone vibrated again. It was a DM. Not from Taehyung, but from Taehyung's wife. It wasn't hostile, it wasn't even long, just a single message. He talks about you in his sleep. His chest tightened like a vice. He didn't respond. He stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then locked his phone and slid it into his hoodie pocket, as though doing so could make the words disappear. They didn't. Later that week, HYBE scheduled a private internal shoot. Not for public release, just internal media, something for the archives. All 7 were invited. The tension was immediate, like the air had been sucked from the room the moment Jungkook walked in and saw Taehyung standing across the studio, adjusting his collar in the mirror. The rest of the members acted normal, or pretended to. Hobi danced quietly to himself near the makeup corner. Jin made some joke about them all looking too mature now for fan cams. Namjoon tried to keep things light but was visibly watching Jungkook like a hawk. Jimin walked up beside him and nudged his shoulder gently. "You okay?" "No." Jimin nodded. "Want me to stand between you?" Jungkook shook his head. "No, if I don't face him now, I never will." The camera flashes began not long after. The first few frames were awkward, stiff, and everyone felt it. But as the session dragged on, old instincts took over. Pose, smile, rotate, look away, soft laugh. It was mechanical, but then came the moment no one expected. The photographer asked for a pair shot. "Jungkook and Taehyung, please." Silence. Jungkook's feet moved before his mind caught up. So did Taehyung's. They stood beside each other, the space between them palpable, as if memory itself hovered like a ghost. Neither touched the other. Neither looked toward the other. "Closer, please," the photographer urged. Taehyung took a half step, so did Jungkook. The camera clicked. Jungkook didn't know if his expression was visible in the photos, but in that moment he felt everything. The shared years, the unraveling, the betrayal, the longing, the confusion, the guilt. He didn't say anything after the shoot, neither did Taehyung. They simply walked past each other, not even brushing sleeves. 2 days later, Jeongyun confronted him again. "You saw him." Jungkook sat on the floor of his apartment, tuning his guitar. She watched him for a moment before continuing, and "I stood beside him for 7 minutes and didn't say a word." "But you wanted to." "Yes." She sat down beside him, sighing. "Then maybe it's time." "Time for what?" "To make your peace, on your own terms." He didn't reply. That night he opened his laptop and typed out a message, not to Taehyung, not to his wife, not to Army, but to the world. A letter. He posted it quietly, without tagging anyone. It read, "There are bonds that don't fit in a headline. There are stories that don't belong to the public. And there are wounds we carry silently, because healing them out loud would be too loud. I've spent months being silent. Not out of pettiness, not out of pride, but because I didn't know how to grieve someone who wasn't dead. I'm learning now. To grieve the loss of a presence. To honor what was without holding onto what can't be. And to love someone deeply, completely, even if they're no longer mine in the way I hoped. This isn't a goodbye. This is just the part where I stop waiting. JJK." The message went viral within minutes. It wasn't just fans, it was the industry, celebrities, friends, strangers. But Jungkook didn't check the replies. He turned off his phone and went to the studio. That same night, someone knocked on the door of the booth while he was mixing. He looked up. Taehyung stood there, eyes red, fingers twitching at his side. They stared at each other through the glass. Neither moved. Then Jungkook reached for the intercom. "Come in." Taehyung stepped inside. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Taehyung said, "I saw your post. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure you'd still let me in." Jungkook leaned back in his chair. What do you want? Taehyung's voice cracked. To say thank you and sorry again, and I think I'm ready to listen now if you'll still talk. Jungkook looked at him, at the man who once knew his every thought, who now felt like a stranger wrapped in familiarity. He nodded. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but permission to begin again, this time with no promises. Just presence. Just now. Taehyung sat down beside him. Jungkook pressed play on the latest mix. The room filled with music, not just notes but memory. And in that small space, two boys who had once broken each other slowly began to rebuild, not what they had, but what they might still create from the pieces. Not the past, but something new. The music played low between them, filling the studio with something that wasn't quite silence but wasn't conversation either. Jungkook didn't speak, not immediately. His hands moved instinctively over the controls, fingers adjusting the reverb with precision, while Taehyung watched from the couch, elbows resting on his knees, body curled inward like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to fully be there. The overhead light buzzed faintly. Outside, the sky was beginning to shift, melting into indigo as night crept in over Seoul. The song ended. Still no words. Jungkook leaned back in his chair, spine stiff, and finally looked at him. I didn't think you'd actually show up again. Taehyung's voice was quiet. I wasn't sure I had the right. That's not how this works, Jungkook said, not cruelly, just honestly. Taehyung nodded, his jaw tightening as he searched the floor for something it could offer him in return. Then teach me again. Jungkook blinked, caught off guard. What? Teach me how to be in your life, without breaking it this time. The words didn't come wrapped in poetry. They came stripped, raw, and that's what made them land deeper than any apology. Jungkook stood up from the chair and crossed the room slowly. He didn't know what he was doing until he did it. He didn't think he moved, guided only by memory and instinct. He walked past Taehyung, reached for the small cabinet by the back wall and pulled out a box. An old, dusty container labeled with a fatting piece of tape. It read, Jeju 2019. He placed it between them. Taehyung looked at it like it might shatter on contact. Open it, Jungkook said. Taehyung hesitated only a second before slowly lifting the lid. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Polaroids, film rolls, strips of laughter frozen in time. Beach walks, late-night ramen bowls, Taehyung mid-jump with sand between his toes, Jungkook with his head tilted back laughing, hair still damp from the ocean. Notes scribbled on napkins, lyrics half-formed, paper receipts folded like prayers. Taehyung stared at one picture, one where his arm was slung around Jungkook's shoulder, both of them squinting at the sun, cheeks pink, eyes happy in a way neither of them had been in a long time. I forgot this one existed, Taehyung murmured. I didn't, Jungkook said. I've looked at it more times than I want to admit. Taehyung swallowed hard, blinking quickly. I want to believe we can get back to that. Jungkook's voice dropped low. We can't. Taehyung looked up, startled. Jungkook exhaled, voice steady but soft. Because we're not those people anymore. You're someone's husband. I'm someone who had to learn how to live without you. The truth lingered between them, heavy and undeniable. I know, Taehyung said finally, but maybe we can be something new, not what we were, not what people want, just honest. Jungkook didn't respond right away. He sat back down, picking up one of the photos, tracing the edge of it with his thumb. I used to hate the idea of starting over, he said. It felt like admitting everything before was wasted. Taehyung's voice was barely audible, and now I think it's the only thing that makes sense. For the first time that night, a fragile thread formed between them, not built on the past, but on the courage to look at it without trying to resurrect it. They stayed there for hours, flipping through old memories not to relive them, but to grieve them properly. When Taehyung finally stood to leave, Jungkook walked him to the door. The city was alive outside, lights flickering, taxis humming past, a group of teens laughing too loudly down the block. Life didn't pause for anyone, no matter how broken they felt. Taehyung paused at the exit, hand on the doorframe. "Do you think the others hate me?" he asked. Jungkook's answer came immediately. "No, but they miss you." Taehyung nodded slowly. "I miss them too." He stepped out, then turned back for just a moment. "I'll come by again, if you let me." Jungkook looked at him, and for once, his answer didn't carry the weight of everything unsaid. "Come by when you're not afraid of who you are around me." Taehyung didn't smile, but something in his eyes warmed. Deal. And then he was gone. Days passed. Jungkook didn't chase after the moment. He let it sit, let it settle. He didn't try to analyze it or name it. He just kept writing, kept recording. Ashes was almost done with post-production. HYB hadn't pushed for a release date, but he knew the team was watching, quietly hopping he'd want to put it out. When he finally gave them the go-ahead, it was without fanfare. Just a simple message, ready. The day the track dropped, the internet exploded. It wasn't just the fans, it was the industry. Ashes trended globally within minutes. Critics praised its restraint, its elegance, its quiet devastation. Fans cried, made edits, shared memories. They debated its meaning, quoted lyrics, whispered about who it might be about. Jungkook didn't say a word. He didn't need to. That night he went live again. Just his voice, the guitar, and silence between the chords. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me space and for still being here." He didn't elaborate, didn't name names, but those who mattered knew. After the live ended, he sat in the studio long past midnight, watching the waveform of his heart echo into the void. He didn't hear from Taehyung for a while after that. Until one morning, a letter arrived. A real one. Not a text, not a DM, not even a phone call. Just paper. The envelope was blank, the handwriting familiar. Inside was a single page. Not poetic. Not overwritten. Just one sentence. "Thank you for not letting the fire consume me completely." There was no signature. But there didn't need to be. Jungkook folded the letter gently, placing it in the same drawer where the old ones lived. He didn't reread it. He didn't need to. That night, as the first snow of the season dusted the sidewalks, he walked outside without a coat, breathing in the clean, frozen air. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something not like ache, but like peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because he was no longer afraid to feel it all. The love, the loss, the beginning, and the end. Snow fell softly against the glass panes of the studio window as the clock ticked past 2 a.m., blanketing the city in silence. The world outside was hushed, clean, like a canvas waiting to be stained by the footsteps of the morning. Inside, Jungkook stood at the mixing board, the glow of the screens illuminating the angles of his face. His hands rested still against the console, the track looping behind him as if breathing on its own, gentle piano notes, the lingering echo of his voice, and the crackle of a heartbeat caught in rhythm. He hadn't spoken to Taehyung since the letter, hadn't needed to. It wasn't about words anymore. Some things are carried without explanation, like the familiar ache of an old scar that only whispers when it rains. They didn't follow each other again. They didn't meet up. They just existed, parallel lines with too much history to erase and too much tenderness left unspoken to burn away. A knock came at the studio door, sharp but hesitant. Jungkook turned his head slightly, unsure whether to answer, but his feet moved before he could think. He opened the door to find Jimin standing there in a heavy coat, snow clinging to his hair, cheeks pink from the wind. He didn't say hello. He just stepped in, closed the door behind him, and shrugged off the cold like it was another layer of unspoken tension. "You saw the article?" Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook nodded. HYBE hadn't released a statement, but a tabloid had. Sources close to the family confirmed Taehyung's marriage is under pressure. Rumors, anonymous quotes, speculation wrapped in suggestion. Jimin crossed the room and slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I hate this," he muttered. "I hate that even now people are treating you like a subplot." Jungkook leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. "I'm not a subplot, not anymore." "Still hurts, doesn't it?" Jungkook didn't respond. Jimin looked up, his eyes tired. "I just want you to be okay." "I am," Jungkook said softly, "just not all the time." The truth settled between them like dust. Jungkook sat down across from him, their knees nearly touching. The silence wasn't awkward. It was familiar, almost comforting, like two people who'd walked through fire and survived. "I heard he's moving out of the house," Jimin said eventually. "Temporarily at least." Jungkook didn't ask for more. He didn't want details. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. He looked down at his hands. What would I even say to him now? Jimin met his gaze. Maybe it's not about what you say. Maybe it's about what you don't have to say anymore. They didn't talk much after that. Jimin fell asleep on the couch around 4, the snow still falling quietly outside. Jungkook sat beside him, watching the horizon slowly shift, Seoul waking inch by inch beneath the pale orange of sunrise. The city looked different these days, less threatening somehow. Maybe he had changed. Maybe everything had. That evening, he received a text from someone he hadn't heard from in nearly 2 years. Yuna, Taehyung's older cousin. A message that simply said, "He's not doing well. I thought you should know, but I'm not asking you to fix it." He read it 3 times before setting the phone down. That night he didn't sleep. Not because he was restless, but because he felt like he was standing at the edge of something he hadn't named yet. Not love, not grief, something in between. Something shaped like memory and bruised trust. Something that had never fully healed but had learned how to breathe anyway. The next day, he walked past the cafe where they used to meet. The lights inside were warm, the barista still the same, and he wondered briefly whether the staff still remembered their laughter echoing across the floor. Whether they still remembered how Jungkook would wait for Taehyung to arrive, always 5 minutes late, always with a grin, always humming some melody that didn't exist yet. He didn't go inside. He just stood across the street and watched the windows for a moment before turning away. When he got home, he found Jeongyeon sitting at his kitchen table, flipping through an old BTS photo book. Her hair was tied in a loose knot, and she wore one of his oversized tour sweatshirts, sleeves pulled over her hands like she used to when she was a teenager. "You okay?" she asked, not looking up. "I don't know," he answered. She nodded, closing the book gently. "That's allowed." She slid a folded piece of paper toward him. "It came for you." He frowned. "From who?" "No return name, just him." Jungkook stared at the envelope. His chest felt too tight again. Jeongyeon stood to leave. "I'll be upstairs." He opened it slowly. Inside wasn't a letter, not this time. It was a photo. Taken years ago, from a disposable camera they used during one of the overseas tour. He remembered that day. They were in Madrid. Taehyung had convinced him to take the afternoon off and wander the city. No itinerary, no pressure. Just 2 boys pretending they weren't famous, laughing at pigeons, getting lost in winding streets. In the photo, Jungkook was caught mid-laugh, leaning against a street lamp, Taehyung standing beside him, reaching up to fix his hair. The moment was unguarded, completely them. On the back of the photo were 6 words, scrawled in rushed handwriting. "I didn't know how to stay." Jungkook folded the photo and set it down. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just closed his eyes, exhaled, and whispered, "Neither did I." The next day he returned to the studio, sat at the piano, pressed record, and began something new. Not about Taehyung. Not about loss. But about forgiveness. Not the kind you give to someone else. The kind you give yourself. And as he played, the snow outside finally began to melt. The melody was different this time. Softer, slower. Not sad, but quiet in a way that felt like healing. Jungkook's fingers danced over the keys of the grand piano in the smaller studio room, light from the early morning sun spilling across the polished surface like it was blessing him gently. There were no cameras, no staff, no mics capturing every breath, just him and the music. And for once, the silence didn't feel like loneliness, it felt like space. Forgiveness had become a shape in his mind. It wasn't sharp like the anger he used to carry. It didn't blaze like grief or collapse like heartbreak. It was something rounder now, something soft and pale and almost weightless. He hadn't chased it, hadn't hunted it down in lyrics or late-night phone calls or half-finished letters. It had just come, slowly, quietly, like snow melting in sunlight. He pressed the final chord, letting it linger. Then he sat in the stillness, breathing. The door opened quietly behind him. Jeongyeon stepped inside, holding 2 cups of coffee, her hair tied back, eyes scanning the room like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to interrupt. Jungkook turned, smiled faintly, and reached for one of the cups. She passed it to him wordlessly. "I heard," she said finally. "Heard what?" "He's in Busan, alone." Jungkook nodded once but didn't ask how she knew. Her network was always subtle but terrifyingly accurate. "You going to see him?" He sipped the coffee, stared out the window for a moment. "No." Jeongyeon tilted her head slightly. "Why?" "Because there's nothing more to say." "You sure?" Jungkook looked down at his hands, the way they rested against the cup like they were no longer heavy. "I'm sure." She studied him for a moment, then leaned against the wall. "You've changed." "I know. I'm proud of you." He didn't reply, just held her gaze for a second longer before looking away, his throat tightening. That meant more than she'd ever know. Later that day, he wandered into the city. No mask, no hat, just him. For the first time in a long time, he didn't worry about being seen. Not because he wasn't recognizable, but because he had stopped hiding from himself. He walked past the Han River, the breeze cool and sharp, the sun brushing against his cheeks as if to say you're still here, and that's enough. He stopped at a small bookshop, the kind hidden in the corner of a quiet alley where no music played and the scent of old paper filled the air like incense. The owner, an old man with glasses that kept sliding down his nose, nodded at him in greeting, not recognizing him as an idol, but as a boy with tired eyes. Jungkook liked that. He picked up a novel with a cracked spine. The title was handwritten on a paper slip, Things We Learn After the Storm. He read the first line and felt something shiver down his back. Sometimes the people we love are not the ones who stay, but they're the ones who teach us how to remain. He bought the book and didn't open it again for 3 days. When he did, it was past midnight. The apartment was quiet, the city lights blinking beyond the window like distant stars. He read until dawn, lost in words that sounded like memories. Some lines felt like letters Taehyung never wrote. Some felt like ones Jungkook had never dared to. A few days later, he returned to the stage. It was a private rehearsal, no press, just the core team and the band. He stood in the center, mic in hand, heart steady. The new song wasn't one fans had heard before. He hadn't shared it, hadn't teased it. He'd kept it tucked away like a secret he wasn't ready to explain. But now he sang. Not to someone. Not about someone. But from himself to himself. The lyrics weren't grand or poetic. They were simple. I gave too much to silence. But silence gave me back. A name I knew before the noise. A home inside the cracks. When he finished, the room didn't applaud. Not because they weren't moved, but because something sacred had happened. Something that didn't need clapping. It needed reverence. He left the stage quietly. On the way out, he saw a figure waiting near the back wall. It was Taehyung. It was his wife. She looked unsure, nervous. He paused. She stepped forward slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry I messaged you." He didn't respond. She continued, her hands twisting together. "I thought I could help. I thought I could soften something between you two." Still, he didn't speak. She swallowed. "You don't have to forgive me. I just wanted to say, he still plays your music when he thinks I'm asleep." He finally looked at her. "He doesn't have to anymore," Jungkook said quietly. She didn't ask what he meant. She just nodded. "Thank you for letting him go." He turned to leave. Before he disappeared, he said, "Tell him, I hope he finds his own song." She blinked quickly, nodded again, and then he was gone. Weeks passed. The seasons shifted. The snow melted fully, and spring returned with its usual arrogance, filling the air with petals and birdsong and the smell of new beginnings. Jungkook sat on his balcony one morning, coffee in hand, watching the street below come back to life. Children running, a couple arguing softly, a dog barking at nothing, the ordinary magic of the world continuing. His phone buzzed. A message. Not from Taehyung. From Namjoon. It was just a link. A small music blog. He clicked it. The article read, "V new solo project teased in cryptic IG story. A song called April Keeps the Ghost." Jungkook didn't open the clip. He didn't listen. But he smiled. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. That night, Jeongyeon found him asleep in the studio, one hand still resting on the keyboard, his breath slow, peaceful. She didn't wake him. She just placed a blanket over his shoulders and whispered, "You made it out." And he had. Not untouched, but whole. He didn't dream that night. Not of Taehyung, not of old rehearsals, not of stadiums bursting with light, not of laughter caught between dressing room mirrors. There were no shadows chasing him, no echoes of things left unsaid, just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel hollow but earned. His breathing was deep, even. The blanket Jeongyeon had draped over him slipped slightly as he shifted, the corner resting over the edge of the piano bench. Morning filtered through the blinds, soft and golden. When he stirred, the first thing he noticed was the warmth in his chest. Not fire, not ache, just warmth, like the beginning of something new, something untouched by the past. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes with the back of his hand. The studio was still, the only sound coming from the gentle hum of the heater and the low creak of wood beneath him. He saw Jeongyeon's note taped to the wall, a doodle of a bunny with a small speech bubble that read, "You better eat something when you wake up, or else." He chuckled softly, tearing it down and slipping it into his notebook. The world outside was already moving, a rhythm of its own, unconcerned with heartbreak or healing, just marching forward. Jungkook opened his email, not really expecting anything important. But there it was. A message from HYBE. Subject line, proposal, conceptual collaboration with V. He stared at it. For a moment his stomach tightened. That name, no last names, just initials, the public mask, the persona. The version the world still wanted to believe was intact, untouched, pristine. His fingers hovered over the touchpad. He didn't click it, not yet. Instead, he opened the draft folder. The last message he wrote to Taehyung was still there, written weeks ago, never sent. It said, "I think I understand now, why you left when you did, why you loved her, why you didn't fight me, because you were tired. And so was I, and I wish I could tell you that we'd have survived it if we just held on. But maybe holding on would have broken us more than letting go ever did." He deleted it. Not out of bitterness, but because he didn't need to send it anymore. That version of him had already said goodbye. He finally clicked the email. The body of the message was brief. A concept project, One song, a minimalist stage, no press, just music, just them, if Jungkook agreed. They were leaving it up to him. No pressure. Just an open door. And for a moment, he didn't know what to feel. The idea of standing beside Taehyung again, not as echoes of who they were, but as strangers trying to remember what it meant to create something together, it was terrifying. But there was something beautiful in that fear too. He closed the email, didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, he went to the rooftop of the building, his favorite place. The place where everything felt distant, where the noise of the city became manageable, where he could breathe without needing to explain what he felt. The wind tugged at his hair, cold but welcome. He stared out at Seoul, sprawling and infinite. He thought about everything they'd lost, everything they'd preserved in silence, and everything they still had a chance to rebuild. Not friendship, not the past, but understanding. Jungkook pulled out his phone and sent one message. If we do this, it has to be honest. No pretending, no masks, just us. Taehyung replied 4 hours later. Then let it be us. The first time they stepped back into the same booth together, it wasn't smooth. It was quiet, careful. Jungkook arrived first, early out of habit, and sat on the edge of the couch, fidgeting with his rings. When the door opened, he looked up, and there he was. Taehyung, wearing black, slim, understated. His hair was longer now, the strands brushing just under his ears. His eyes found Jungkook immediately. There was no hesitation, just a long inhale, then a small nod. Jungkook stood. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. Taehyung walked over to the opposite chair and sat, exhaling like he'd been holding something in for too long. You ready? He asked, voice low. Jungkook studied him for a second, then nodded. No lies, Jungkook said. No lies, Taehyung agreed. They started slow, one chord, one line. Jungkook sang it first. The lyric wasn't even finished, just a thought. But Taehyung picked up the harmony instinctively, layering it with a softness that hadn't aged. They moved like mirrors, slightly out of sync at first, but finding their rhythm with every breath. 3 hours in, Jungkook laughed. Not because of a joke, but because he forgot what it felt like to feel that free with him. Taehyung looked over, eyebrows raised. What? Jungkook shook his head, smiling. I just didn't think it would feel this. Okay. Taehyung leaned back, nodding slowly. I didn't think we'd survive each other. Silence. Then Jungkook asked the question he'd been avoiding. Are you okay? Taehyung looked away, stared at the soundboard for a long time. I don't know yet. Jungkook nodded. Me either. They didn't need to say more. That honesty was enough. They finished the demo in 2 days. The song was simple, a blend of guitar and soft synth, woven with vocal runs that overlapped but never clashed. Lyrically, it wasn't about love or heartbreak. It was about time, how it changes people, how silence doesn't always mean goodbye, how healing can be loud or so quiet it sounds like breathing. They named it Unspoken. The release date was unannounced. No promo. Just a midnight drop. Fans were stunned. The song appeared without warning, accompanied only by a single image, 2 silhouettes standing in different directions with a thin thread of light connecting them. The internet lit up in seconds. No scandals. No chaos. Just gratitude. And awe. Because the song didn't sound like reconciliation. It sounded like release. Jungkook turned off his notifications that night, sat in his apartment with the lights off, listening to the city move beneath him. His phone buzzed once. A message from Jeongyeon. I listened, I cried, you're free now, aren't you? He stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Yeah, I think I am. And for the first time in a long time, he believed it. The scars were still there. but they no longer dictated the song. They simply shaped it. And as the final chorus of Unspoken played through his speakers, Jungkook leaned back, closed his eyes and let go of everything.